Hi, it's Carol Ricard, and welcome to Healthy Choices. This is our second session. Our next session, which is going to be April 26th, is going to be on healthy relationships, and today's is actually on a healthy mind, which to me also speaks to emotional health. And here's Healthy Body Review. In case you didn't get to come to that session, you can see the video replay, which is the same place that this one is, in fact, up above there. So, our mission today is that I want to give you some tools and rules to help you harness the power of your mind and to better manage your emotional health. And when we talk about our emotional health, the same tools that we did the first session also apply to this session, which would be the Life Wellness Blueprint and also the Maxims for Christian Living by Father Hopko. So I asked in my workshop people to raise their hands if you had a toolbox or a tool drawer at home that at least had like a wrench and a screwdriver and maybe a pair of pliers. And the reason I asked that is because just like we have tools for physical challenges, I think we have to have tools for emotional challenges. And the first session I asked people how many had ever used a knife as a screwdriver, and a lot of people raised their hands. And then this session I asked how many things have you used duct tape for? And got a lot of uses. A few of mine I wanted to share were my glasses. I actually have used it as a lint brush to take the dog hair off. Works better than those roly ones because those you just end up spending so much money on. And then also my radiator hose when I was traveling from Manhattan, Kansas to Kansas City one time. Radiator blew a hole and it was just a really good thing. I had some duct tape in the trunk. Now, I know you think you're looking at a weed trimmer, right? But you're not, because it was actually my lawnmower for 2 years. You see, I had lived in a townhouse, and I had wanted to get one of these babies once I moved to my house. And I have about an acre of, I don't want to say grass, I'll say weeds. It can be green, so it looks like grass. So I knew that I had to save up for the lawnmower. So for 2 years, this is how I trimmed my grass, or my weeds, I should say. And these to me are really good examples of survival tools. You know, they're a quick fix, right? The problem is they're only a temporary fix. And just like we have survival tools for physical challenges, we also have survival tools for emotional challenges. And I'd like to share a couple examples of those with you. So this is a picture of my father, and he was playing Cowboys and Indians when he was a young boy, about 8 years old. And the kid he was playing Cowboys and Indians with had a loaded .22, and so my father was actually shot. And my uncle did, brain surgery because back then it was lead bullets. But one of the really important stories I like to share about my father is when he went to high school, the teacher had apparently called my grandmother into school and didn't think that he was going to be very good and said you might want to put him in a vocational program. Well, she didn't, and it's a good thing because my father went on to become a doctor. But I just often think, wow, what if she had just listened to somebody else's opinion? Les Brown has a great quote. He says, "Do not let somebody else's opinion of you become your reality," which I think is great. However, for me, the survival tool was actually alcohol. And the problem was I was only 14 years old. What had happened, I'd overheard a conversation that one weekend and figured out that my father was actually dying from cancer. And of course, I didn't tell anybody because nobody told me, right? But I started stealing a lot of alcohol, and truthfully, it continued through the end of my freshman year in high school. And it wasn't until the end of the year when I actually got an award in basketball for being the most improved player that I realized that maybe I could be good at basketball. And to be good at basketball meant that I couldn't drink. So I kind of swapped my tools out. Another really important example is Oprah. She battled her weight for years, and she started to get success only when she realized that food was her survival tool. So I want to ask people to think about what tools are you using to deal with the emotional challenges in your life. Now you got to be careful because here's some unhealthy ways that people can deal with emotional challenges: shopping, eating, if you're a smoker, complaining, worrying, all of these. And what I've really done with my career is help people swap out their tools. So to give up the survival tools and replace them with what I call life tools. So I'd also asked in the crossroads for anybody to think about, had there been a time when worry had kept you up at night? And in the workshop, just about everybody's hands went up on this one. So I want to make sure that you leave here with some tools to manage the worry. And one of the first tools I want to give you is what really worry is. And that is, worries waste our ready resources instead of examining solutions. And if you've never seen these before, I call these artonyms or words of purpose. Another thing I call them is gifts from God, because a word pops into my head and just I try and figure out what does that mean for this person or for myself. And now, one of my rules is don't complain. And that also happens to be maxim number 39. And here's what happens when we complain. We concentrate on making problems larger, actually increasing negativity. So people think that complaining is sometimes doing something about the problem, but my own experience has been that complaining just makes the problem even more magnified and makes it bigger, and it also keeps it alive. Because when I stopped complaining about people I was working with, believe it or not, those people actually started to change. So I want you to think about a moment in time. And the moment in time is a moment when you just want to speed it up. You were just ready for it to be over before it even started. It could be something that was embarrassing or fearful or just upsetting. So take a second to think about a moment in time that you wished just went by really fast. So I want to share a couple with you. This is me going on vacation about 5 years ago, and I didn't even get on the plane, and I was hoping it had already landed, because it's amazing to me what happens when we see propellers, right? And that's the only planes that we used to have to fly on. However, it was one of my speeded up moments. Another one on that same trip was this. I wanted my brother to hurry up, get up, so I could get on down to the bottom. Now, this is Half Dome, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it later, but that's the looking up direction. So we had to go down to the bottom. So, and truthfully, he did kiss the ground, so I figured, guess what? I guess he wanted to get down pretty fast too. But you'd never know it by him sitting down, right? So I want you to think of a moment now that you wished you could slow it down and make it last a really long time. So here's one of my moments, and it's from that very same trip. This is the lake where I grew up, and I could have just stayed there. I mean, and that's my sister and her family, and of course their dog, who's much more talented than mine is. And you have kids, so with kids, this probably happens where you just wish you could capture that moment, right? And just kind of keep them there. And it could also be your speeded up moment too with kids, depending upon their age and what they're doing. I don't have kids, but I have dogs. So I often, when I've had a puppy, wished I could just keep it a puppy. All right, I know that's not possible. And then another moment was really with my two older guys there. So how'd you do? Were you able to speed it up? Were you able to slow it down? No, we can't do any of that stuff, right? And I have some news. First, I like to start with the bad news. And the bad news is this: there is no such thing as time management. And that's because it's always moving at the same speed. So we're not going to manage time because it's just going to keep moving at the very same speed. However, here's the good news. And the good news is that there's person management. So we can't manage the time, but we can manage ourselves. In fact, I like to call this only you management. And I don't know if this describes you at any times in your life, but certainly me. I could feel like I'm going in 5 different directions. And it's really about taking control and managing me and my choices that then helps me have the time to do what it is that I want to do or I need to do. So I've kind of phrased things in challenges that we face. And challenge number one we face is having no balance in our life. And what I mean by that is there once was a time when I would take work home with me. Literally, take some work home with me, but most important, I would take home the stress of the workday with me. In fact, for me, it got to a point where there was a personal impact. And I want you to think about what's your personal impact of having no balance. And it could be no balance between you and who you might be taking care of. It could be no balance between, your role as a wife or a husband and your role as a parent. Or you might be just like me, with work and home kind of life. For me, the personal impact was actually my migraines got out of control. And so I knew that I needed to make some kind of drastic changes. Because what I used to do is carry home my work stress with me, and I would get home and I would be complaining about this and that, and usually it had to do with my coworkers and not with the patients that I worked with at all. Although sometimes I'd be thinking about them or worried about them. So I had to come up with some tools for creating life balance, and I'd like to introduce those to you now. Because what life balance does is it takes that where there is no boundary and it actually creates a boundary. So work is at work, and then there are times when home is home. And the first tool I came up with called the garbage tool. And the reason why is because there was a hospital that I worked at, and what I came to realize is that right outside the front door was a garbage can. Now, it wasn't one of those, it actually was one of these. All right. And so what I imagined and pictured myself doing was as I walked out the door to go home, I would take all of my work and just the whole workload and dump it. Imagine that I dumped it in the garbage can. And then if my brain starts to try and think about it, I just pictured the garbage can. And now there is an amazing power in an image over a thought. And the image of the garbage can canceled out the stress just coming back to me. And then what I imagined I'd do is I would pick it up as I walked in for the next morning, because that was the only place that I needed to have it was at work. So here's the thing. If you don't have a garbage can at work, maybe you can do this at home. So even if you get home and you're about to walk into your house, and if you have a garbage can outside, imagine yourself just dumping it outside and not taking it in the house with you. The next tool is what I call Vault It. And what that involves is writing down something and then tucking it away and putting it away, or I like to think vaulting it, because in this way you can't get at it, right? So I've used this at work and even on vacation. An example on vacation was that I had a niece who'd did something. And as I lay down to go to sleep that night, that was the thought that I just couldn't get off of my mind. And of course, the more you think about things, then sometimes the more angry or upset or frustrated you get. So I got up, wrote down, the subject matter, which I think was money, and put it in the book that I had, which I took on vacation to read with me. And then anytime my brain wanted to think about it again, all I did was I pictured the cover of the book. And it was like, don't have access to it. It's kind of vaulted away in there. Or you can have a box. Now, at work, over the last 23 years, I've actually had plenty of people that we made God boxes or even a worry box of some kind. And I've had people who that's what they used their Bible for, was kind of a book to put the worries in. And there actually is a book called The God Box, and about a woman who used to have a God box, and she would put all of her worries in there. And then after she passed away, the family discovered these boxes of things, and so they actually ended up putting it into a book. I have not read it, but I did have somebody tell me it was very good. The other tool that I had to come up with, and this was a more recent tool within the last year, I'd say, was I called Dump It. And the situation was that I'd had a pretty big change where I worked. And so it wasn't the same. The doctor I had worked with for 12 years retired. And I just found myself just feeling kind of like really overwhelmed and I don't know, the coulda, woulda, shouldas. So what I started doing was before I left work, I would set my clock, which was my phone, for 5 minutes, and I would end up writing. Now, I didn't pay attention to what I wrote. I just wrote. So whatever came out, came out. All right. And after I did that, I actually shredded in the shredder. So if you only have a minute, tell you what, 60 seconds is less than none at all. And the other thing is that if you happen to get up at night, or let's say you lay down to go to sleep and that worry that I asked you about earlier was keeping you awake, what you would want to do is get up, write it down. It could be, I'm so worried about my children, I'm not quite sure. But you don't read what you wrote, because the minute you read what you wrote, you reloaded it. And then you rip it up. So then challenge number 2 is no focus. And that could be going in a million different directions at one time. Chaos is constantly having activity obstruct success. So you can't have chaos in your life and also success. And I also think happiness, because chaos is just going to have the activity going in directions that takes you away from might create happiness in your life. So this was me at work. I would be sitting there with paperwork, maybe take a phone call, then somebody would stop by my office to talk, and I'd be writing in the middle of a note or a letter or a treatment plan, working on the computer. I had to always get myself something to drink, and sometimes I actually had to drive patients home. And I would find myself finishing nothing, and then I was staying an hour later at the end of the day just to get everything done. So I came up with this tool that, well, it wasn't for me, it was for a patient, but I guess because I needed it. And the word is finish. Finish means to focus in now instead of stopping halfway. And so here's how you use it. If you're doing a task, first you have to catch yourself stopping something in the middle of it, right? And then, or use this at the beginning of a task that you usually don't stop. And what you say to yourself, so for me it was putting laundry away, I'd say, Carol, finish, focus in now instead of stopping halfway. And you say it aloud, and it's amazing the power of just saying that aloud so you could hear it, how much more you're going to get done, so that it becomes a new habit of finishing. The other thing is, in the workshop that we did, we had a video, and so I'm not going to show this. Well, I did it. I was able to get it done the last time, so you're probably going to be able to see it. So I'm pretty certain that that's what you're going to watch. And the video comes from a place called simpletruths.com, which you can go there and watch this video anytime you want. It's also where the video from the last workshop came from. Plus, they have like 70 others that are just really inspirational and motivational. So you're going to watch that video, and then I'll be back in just, 3 minutes actually. Well, what'd you think? Oh, the whole goal to me of that video is that we have to have a priority with what we do. And priority is putting responsibilities in order regarding importance to you. Not somebody else's priority. You got to come up with your own priorities. And if you don't, then to me, what the pickle jar kind of says is that if you don't make those be the priority and you put everything else in your life, then what is the priority isn't going to get taken care of. So, challenge number 3 I had as stress. Now, got kids? Doesn't matter how old they are, right? Or has your washer ever broken on you? Dryer too? Or are you even somebody that hates to do laundry? Because here's the thing. You could already be a stress expert and not even know it. And here's what I mean by that. Week 1, the laundry starts to pile up. And you're pretty busy. You don't get around to doing it, and so you don't. And so the next week, you're looking at a pile that's grown. And you look at that and you say, oh my goodness, that's too long. And maybe you're going to the Chinese auction. So you don't do it. And then you are looking at a pile of laundry tall. So here's what I want you to imagine. If you had to look at a pile of laundry as tall as you were, how would you feel? And some of the really common responses I get are overwhelmed, angry, and mostly angry at themselves for letting it get there, and kind of hopeless, like, oh my God, I'm never going to get this done, right? And here's the important thing I want you to think about laundry. Laundry is like stress, all right? Stress is like laundry. It piles up. And if you've ever had kids, you know that they would try and hide the clothes either under the bed, or I used to hide mine in my closet. But even if you try to hide it, and even if you pretend that it's not there, it doesn't stop it from piling up. So it still stops. It's still going to pile up. And so, how do you keep it from piling up? Well, you have to do at least 1 load a day, right? In this case, you have to do 1 load a day of stress laundry. Now, you're probably wondering, like, all right, what is stress laundry, Carol? Well, first off, you need some stress away laundry soap in order to do stress laundry, all right? Guaranteed to lighten any day. You notice the directions, use at least 1 time daily, separate into piles if too large for 1 load, and you might need to do more than 1 load depending on how much you got. So if you got a lot of stress going on in your day, you might need to do a couple loads of stress laundry. Now, everything on this list has the potential, right? There's a couple that I left off, and one is jewelry untangling, because I'm usually the only person in the room, although in our workshop, I actually was 1 plus 1. I had a fellow jewelry untangler in our workshop. And the other I left off was weeding. And the reason I left those 2 off is because, and you get the point, is that not everything works the same for everybody. So you got to find what works for you. Now, here's the thing. I have some laws about this. 1, you must try new things. You need to have more than 1 screwdriver in your drawer. You can't keep doing just 1 or 2 little things. You need to have different tools to have access to. So you got to try new things. When you try those new things, you have to score it to see if it works for you. So in our workshop, I asked how many people like to do Sudoku, or how many people like to do crossword puzzles. And honestly, if I do those things, my stress score will go up, because those are not relaxing for me. However, if I can do a word search, that's relaxing for me. And so you're doing this with new things to know if it helps you or it hurts you, right? And then the last thing you got to do is you got to do a new thing 6 times. Because we talked about this before, that if you put your hands together and you relace them so your other thumb's on top, doing something out of your comfort zone is going to feel weird. You have to do it enough times that it doesn't feel weird to you, all right? The other way of keeping the pile from getting bigger is actually avoid adding to the pile, right? So, has anybody here left early for a doctor's appointment just to get there so that you didn't have to have the stress of being late? Or have you gone and found like a new location, like a doctor's appointment, or even a conference I was going to present at? I went and found out where it was, and I did it because I wanted to know ahead of time where it was that I was going to avoid myself added stress that morning. The other way to avoid adding to the pile is an equation that I came up with. And this equation is S plus T equals R. S stands for the situation. T equals our thoughts. And then R is for response. So the situation plus our thoughts equals our response. And I came up with this because there are a lot of situations that you can't control, right? You can control, though, how you think about them. So I have a great example for you. Hurricane Irene first, and then Hurricane Sandy. Where I live, I actually, with both of them, lost power for 2 weeks. And this is a really good example. Your situation is a hurricane, right? So here's one of my neighbors. The S, hurricane. Can't do anything about it. The T is... hers was, I can't believe it's taking so long. And guess what her response was? Anger. She was angry at the power company because they were taking so long. My equation was just a little bit different. It started out the same, the hurricane. However, my thought was it could be worse. And my response was gratitude. And my it could be worse was I had trees come down, but they didn't come down on my house. And even if they had come down on my house, I wasn't at the shore where I lost everything that I owned, because it was flooded. So I want to show you that the thought is really the game changer here. All right. So I wanted to show these two side by side. And you can see that when the thought being different, it led to different outcomes. Now, another situation, I call it changing the equation, because even if you've had an old negative way of dealing with a situation, you can come up with a new way. So the situation I like to share is my dog had seizures, and it was the second time I had to drop her off at the animal hospital and leave her there. And I'm driving up 195 thinking to myself, what am I going to do? And I was aware that I was feeling very overwhelmed. And I caught myself, all right? And so we had Callie's seizures, and my thought changed. I changed my thought, and my thought was, I'm doing everything I can, and things are slowly getting better because she hadn't had any seizures in 6 months. And we were used to going every 2 weeks having a seizure. And immediately I felt calm and peaceful in my body. Now, here's the important thing about it. I'm not saying that we can stop thoughts from happening, all right? I'm not saying we can control them that way. What I'm saying is that our thoughts that we focus on will affect our feelings and also our behavior. And that's really what the connection Father Alexis talks about in Ancient Wisdom and Aaron Beck's cognitive therapy. It's using your thoughts to work for you rather than against you. And again, you can't stop thoughts from coming. And the example I always teach is this. So you're looking at a TV, right? And you notice we see the airplane going across and we see the boat going across, and you're kind of paying attention to a show. And then all of a sudden at the bottom, what? Oh, breaking news. You get to choose what you pay attention to and where you are focusing your attention right now. So here's the thing. Did the stuff behind it stop? No, it didn't. But where you focused your attention was in a different direction. And that's what we have to do in our lives in order to move the negative thought to a more positive thought. My one, I think if you could just come up with none other than this, it could be worse, and then say aloud how it could be worse so that it actually enforces really a state of gratitude. And so challenge number 4 is that we don't use our full potential. I think of our mind as the power tool, or as the key, really, to unlocking success and happiness. And if you've ever used a regular screwdriver and an electric one, you know that the power tool is the one you want to have in your hand, right? So, mind to me is a magnificent instrument needing direction. And if you don't give it direction, then it's going to go to default. And that would be like letting your GPS determine where you end up going. You gotta take a little bit of responsibility in establishing the direction that you want to go. And our mind really has the power to help us or hurt us. And I'd like to give you some examples of this. So, Henry Beecher was in World War II and was a medic, and ended up they ran out of morphine. But instead of telling people that they ran out of morphine, he just started giving them saline. And the amazing thing that happened was 40% of them reported their pain had been eased by what they thought was morphine, but wasn't morphine. So just their brains thinking that they were getting the morphine had that power. And that speaks to the placebo effect, where they've kind of given people sugar pills and actually thought that it worked. And it also speaks to the nocebo effect, which is if I go in and a doctor tells me, I only have a year to live, that my brain is just going to kind of take and run off with that. Rather than if a doctor tells me, you know what, Carol, we don't know. But as long as you can be healthy and continue to live healthy way, that's really going to be your best option. And then another example, which was on Discovery Health Channel, that Dr. Mosley was an orthopedic surgeon. And he did this kind of procedures. He actually had 2 that he did for people with severe debilitating knee pain. One of the procedures, he would actually scrape stuff off, and the other one, he would actually rinse stuff off. And he wanted to know which one was working better. So he came up with 3 groups. And in the first group, he ended up doing the shave off. So he shaved off that group. The second group, he ended up doing the rinse out. And then the third group, he ended up doing the fake out. He did nothing. He cut open their knee and he kind of splashed around, and he took all the same 45 minutes he would take as if he was doing something. But all he did was make an incision and then end up stitching it back up. Now, everybody went through the same rehab. So that meant that all 3 groups did the same post-care rehabilitation therapy. And guess what? All 3 groups improved. Even the faked out group. In fact, the faked out group had such good response. There was a gentleman by the name of Tony Perez, and before the surgery, he had to walk with a cane. And after the surgery, he actually was able to play basketball with his grandchildren. And they talked of other people who actually couldn't walk and then went on to become, that they could run. And so the amazing thing was is that these people didn't find out until 2 years later that they'd had a fake surgery. Part of me wondered, okay, as soon as they found out they had a fake surgery, how many of them went in the opposite direction then? But several of them, especially Mr. Perez, said, well, it just really speaks to the power of our mind. And that leads me to this. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, by Henry Ford. And here, I said I was going to come back to this. This is a picture of Yosemite. It's actually in California, and I grew up right outside here. And 5 years ago, I went back on vacation and wanted to climb to the top of Half Dome. So that's Half Dome, right? Because I'd had a girlfriend here in New Jersey do it, and I said, I will be darned if I will let a girl from New Jersey do something that that grew up there, had never done. So I asked my brother and my nieces if they wanted to climb to the top of Half Dome with me, and they did. And so this again is diversion and kind of what you see. That's the backside. So that's that side. That's what you're looking at. And what happened is we started out here in the valley at 6 o'clock in the morning. And then you had to kind of go all the way around. And when we got to this place, it was about 3:30 in the afternoon. And my brother and I had gotten separated from my nieces way earlier in the day, who are like, good 15 years younger than us. And he and I looked at this. Now, the cleaned up version was holy cow. All right. And I realized he never Googled to see what he was doing. He just said yes. Now, in his defense, he is a runner, so maybe he felt like, well, whatever we did, he'd be in good enough shape for it. I don't know. However, so he and I kind of looked at this, and I'm afraid of heights. And you know what? We kind of like, I'm proud of how far I got. If I don't get to the top, it doesn't mean I failed. This is a good accomplishment. We didn't think we could. And then, come to find out, we thought that my nieces were kind of halfway up the rock there. Turns out they were behind us. And they came up, and oh my God, they were so excited. And they were like, come on, you ready? And we're like, well, and they're like, oh, come on, you got to do it. And then people were coming off, just saying like, oh my God, it's so awesome. You got to do it. Now, I'm afraid of heights, and it wasn't the going up part that I was afraid of. It was the coming down part, that if I had to look, and see just open space. And a woman came and said, oh, no, you go down the same way you go up. And I was like, oh. So that got us thinking we could, and we did. And this is the view from Half Dome, looking the opposite direction of what that postcard was. And I don't know who the guy is out there. It's not my brother. I wouldn't let him go that close to the edge, So the question I have for you is, what do you find yourself thinking? Can or can't? And you want to harness the power to work for you and not against you. And it's kind of, we choose whether we're going to think we can or we're going to think we can't. We can choose either one of those. Now, sometimes your brain does get kind of stuck on a battery, all right? And have you ever had your real battery ever go dead on you, right? So you had all like the energy, the positive juice drained out of it, and you had to use some jumper cables? Well, I also believe that we need positive thinking jumper cables. And that means sometimes we got to jumpstart our brain because maybe it's stuck on the negative. And so there's some rules to doing that. And I want to share those with you. I call them the 3 Ps. And what they stand for is present. It also stands for positive and powerful. And here's what I mean by each one of those. Present is, think of this. I don't know about you, but I've said, oh, I hope I get this job. I hope I get this job. Or I will be better at eating today. Or I will not have any candy bar today. Or I'm going to. And the problem is that all of those are in the future. So when you're trying to get your brain thinking positive, those aren't going to help. It has to be I am, this is, or I have. I am eating healthier. This is a great day. I have the job. Or I am the best person for this job. Actually, those were true things of mine. Positive means that you can't have any of these in there. Not, won't, and can't. So my patients used to say, well, I won't have a panic attack today. Think about what you say to a 2-year-old. Don't touch. And what do? They touch, right? Because their brains can't kind of like, it just reinforces what you don't want it to reinforce. So you got to get rid of those. And then the other thing powerful means is you act as if, you assume the feeling, or to reinforce. So assume the feeling would be is, how does it feel having gotten that job and experienced that feeling? And reinforce, I'm actually going to talk about here in a minute. But I want to look at some examples so it can kind of make sense. So this is the way not to do it. I will lose 5 pounds by next month. I won't have any desserts this week. I'm going to have a good day. I will eat healthier today. Well, those either violate the present or the positive, right? So let's look at how we could reword them to make them work. I am doing what I need to be healthy. My day is free of my old eating behaviors. Instead of saying I won't have desserts, I say my day is free from my old eating behaviors. Instead of saying I'm going to have a good day, I say this is a great day. Instead of saying I will eat healthier today, I say I am eating healthier today. Make a little bit of sense? And then the reinforcement is you write whatever that is on a piece of paper. It could be a 3x5 card or a piece of paper. And then you read it. Read it when you wake up and read it before you go to sleep. And that's the reinforcement. I came up with this quote a long time ago. Our thoughts and our words are the paintbrushes we use to create our lives. So I would always say to my patients, choose them carefully, right? And I got a couple more power tools that I want to share with you. One day at a time. 5 words, but the most powerful tool that exists. And for me, I didn't always used to live one day at a time. This is a picture of my mom, and she's actually holding my nephew who was born 2 months premature. But before the gift that my mom gave me, I was the most negative, pessimistic person you would probably meet. If you said something good, I would counteract it with something bad. If you said, oh, it's warm outside, I say, or the sun is out, I say, yeah, but it's still freezing, or it's still windy, or what does that matter? But it was after the gift my mom gave me that my life really turned around. And the gift was this. One day, my mom called me, and she said her doctor wanted to see her in the hospital. So I went and I picked her up and I drove her to the hospital. And when we got to the hospital is when I actually discovered that she had cancer. Now, it didn't surprise me that she didn't tell me, because remember, they didn't tell me about my father either. So we admitted her to the hospital that day, and then that afternoon I went and called my brothers and sisters and who lived out on the West Coast and really set up plans how to get my mom back to California because she couldn't fly. And she ended up passing away that night. With that passing, though, I got the greatest gift that I could ever receive, and that was knowing that it doesn't matter what you plan for, even tomorrow, that you have to live life fully present in today. You have to just be in today, because tomorrow may never come. And if you're focused on tomorrow, then you've missed today. So a couple quotes that, the word today, the only day afforded you. So that's what today means to me. The quote I was going to give you a minute ago was, you can't rewrite the past, however you hold the pen today. So we can't change what happened yesterday. We can't even change what happened an hour ago or a minute ago. But what you are capable of doing is changing the moment that you're in right now. And another quote is, whys get us lost in the past, and what ifs get us lost in the future. So if you find yourself using these words a lot, it's a good indication that you're probably not present in today. And then the serenity prayer is one of my other really go-to power tools. Sometimes I've had to repeat this 100 times in my head, just over and over and over and over and over again. But I also came up with a tool for people, and that was the in the stress moment version. Now, in the stress moment version is, can I do anything about it? So one time I was driving to work at the hospital and I got stuck in traffic. And I asked myself the question, can I do anything about it? And I surprised myself because I answered. I said, yeah, stupid, you could have left on time, right? Because I ended up leaving late. I ended up hitting traffic. And I realized, nope, it has to be better. So it has to be, can I do anything about it right now? And if you can't do anything about it right now, then you got to let it go. Because you can't go back to this morning and have left work early. So here's a tool I came up with. You just take an ordinary piece of paper, you write can change, and then about halfway through you write can't change. What you do is you write down the things that stress you out, and you put them where they belong. Can you do anything about the situation, or you can't do anything about it? So hurricanes go under can't, all right? Late for work goes under can, because I really could do something about it, at least in the future. Then I want you to fold the paper just above the words "can't change," and then keep folding it back and forth several times. So you want to get a good crease. Then you want to do is take it and tear it apart by hand on the crease. You can't use scissors. It all has to be done by hand. And then what you want to do is throw away or destroy the can't, because you can't do anything about it. And, right, hold on to the can. And that's the can. And if you have to repeat this every day, then that's okay. So it becomes your map for the day. You hold on to what you can change. And then, one of my most favorite words to fly in my head is let go. And let go means to leave everything to God's ownership. So you're turning over ownership to something much more powerful than you. So just a quick little wrap up. Hopefully what you're walking away with is some tools, but also understanding that life balance is important to our emotional health. And that the mind can be a power tool, and it can help us or it can hurt us. And the best place to be is in the present. So I hope that you've enjoyed this workshop. I will be bringing the tool cards from this workshop to the next one, so hopefully I'll see you there. And if you need the tools, they'll be there. And what it is they're little postcard of stress away. So you have a little postcard with both sides of the stress away, and then you also have a list of the tools and a couple of the rules of the quotes that go there. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next workshop.